In the deepest, coldest corners of our planet, where sunlight dies and pressure crushes steel, evolution has crafted nightmares that defy comprehension. These are not the monsters of fantasy. They are real, they are alive, and they are waiting in the darkness beneath the Antarctic ice. This is the story of a diver who discovered that sometimes the floor beneath you isn't ground at all. Sometimes it's a living, breathing mass of skeletal horrors that should never have existed. The Antarctic Ocean is Earth's last true frontier, a realm so hostile and remote that it might as well be another planet. Here, water temperatures hover perpetually at minus 1.8 degrees Celsius, cold enough to kill any unprotected human within minutes, yet not cold enough to freeze the ocean solid due to its salt content. The pressure at depth is crushing, the darkness is absolute, and oxygen levels are paradoxically higher than in warmer seas. It is this strange combination of factors that has given birth to one of nature's most unsettling phenomena, polar gigantism. In this frozen underworld, creatures that would be small and insignificant in temperate waters grow to grotesque proportions. Worms become as thick as human arms. Jellyfish expand to the size of garbage cans. And sea spiders, delicate spider-like creatures that typically measure a few centimeters across, transform into dinner plate-sized walking skeletons that seem to belong more to science fiction than natural history. The giant Antarctic sea spider, scientifically known as Colossendeis Megalonyx, is not actually a spider at all. It belongs to a class of marine arthropods called pycnogonids, creatures so bizarre that scientists initially struggled to classify them. They are living fossils, virtually unchanged for hundreds of millions of years, persisting in the deep cold where evolution moves at a glacial pace. What makes these creatures truly nightmarish is not their size alone, but their impossible anatomy. A sea spider is essentially all legs. Its body, if you can even call it that, is reduced to almost nothing, a thin tube barely thicker than the limbs attached to it. There is no room inside this minimal torso for organs, so nature found another solution. The creature's digestive system, its heart, and even its reproductive organs are housed inside its legs. When a sea spider walks, its internal organs shift and pulse within those skeletal limbs, a living creature that is somehow more void than substance. At the front of this ambulatory nightmare is the proboscis, a long needle-like tube that the spider uses not to bite, but to pierce. It inserts this biological straw into soft-bodied prey like anemones, sponges, and worms, then slowly sucks out their liquefied tissues. The feeding process is methodical, patient, and disturbingly intimate. The spider does not chase or attack with violence. It simply attaches, penetrates, and drains, a vampire of the deep. The dive began like any other scientific expedition into the Antarctic depths. The diver, a marine biologist specializing in extreme environments, had descended through layers of freezing water, each meter down bringing thicker darkness and greater isolation. The descent was slow, deliberate, accompanied only by the rhythm of breathing through the regulator and the distant creaks of shifting ice above. At 100 meters, the diver's powerful lights cut through the darkness, revealing a landscape alien and barren. Rocky outcrops covered in what appeared to be frost, scattered debris from the frozen surface world above, and stretches of pale sediment that had drifted down through the water column for centuries. There was no movement here, no fish darting between stones, no kelp swaying in invisible currents. This was a place beyond life, or so it seemed. But then the lights caught something unusual. Ahead and below, perhaps another 20 meters down, the ocean floor seemed to change character. Instead of pale sediment, there was color, a deep russet red, textured and organic looking. It appeared to be some kind of coral formation, or perhaps a dense colony of bryozoans, those tiny animals that cluster together to form reef-like structures even in polar waters. The diver descended slowly, carefully monitoring depth and decompression limits. As the distance closed, the formation became more distinct. It was extensive, covering perhaps 15 square meters of the seafloor, rising in irregular mounds and ridges. The texture was intricate, almost lace-like, with thousands of branching structures creating a dense, tangled carpet. It looked ancient, undisturbed, a secret garden of the abyss waiting to be documented. Scientific curiosity overrode caution. The diver needed a sample, a small piece to bring back to the surface for analysis, to identify the species, to understand how such a complex structure could exist in this lightless frozen realm. One gloved hand reached out, fingers extending toward the nearest ridge of the formation, aiming for a protruding branch that could be carefully broken off without damaging the whole. The moment of contact was gentle, almost reverent. But what happened next shattered every assumption about the world beneath the ice. The coral reacted, not with the passive breaking of a calcified structure, but with movement. Slow, deliberate, organic movement that no plant or mineral formation should possess. The texture that had seemed like rigid branches suddenly revealed itself as jointed limbs. The mounds weren't geological features, but masses of interlocked bodies. The entire formation began to shift, to separate, to resolve into its true nature. It was not one organism, it was thousands. What the diver had mistaken for a coral reef was actually a mating aggregation. A writhing pile of giant Antarctic sea spiders layered on top of one another in a breeding frenzy that had likely been ongoing for days or weeks. The russet color was not pigment in rock, but the natural hue of countless arachnid bodies pressed together. The lace-like texture was the overlapping of thousands of legs, each one as long as a human forearm, each one containing living organs that pulsed with cold-blooded circulation. The diver's brain struggled to process the sight. What had been a static landscape 1 second earlier was now resolving into individual creatures, dozens visible in the immediate light, hundreds more suggested by movement in the periphery, and the horrifying implication that the entire visible formation, all 15 square meters of it, was composed entirely of living spiders. They were awakening. The disturbance of the diver's touch had triggered a response throughout the mass. Spiders that had been locked in slow-motion mating rituals began to disengage, their movements languid but purposeful. There was no panic in their reaction, no startled response, just a collective, zombie-like awareness that something foreign had entered their domain. The diver's hand recoiled instinctively, but it was already too late. The nest had been touched. The swarm was aware. The horror of what followed was not in speed or violence, but in the inexorable, dreamlike quality of the attack. These were not aggressive predators lunging at prey. They were curious, methodical creatures investigating an anomaly in their environment. But there were so many of them, and they were so alien in their movement, that curiosity became suffocating. The first spider detached completely from the mass and drifted upward, its 8 legs spread wide like the ribs of an umbrella. In the diver's headlamp beam, its body was translucent, organs visible as dark shadows moving within the legs. It looked like a skeleton wrapped in thin parchment, a creature that should not be alive, but somehow was. It descended toward the diver with dreamlike slowness, legs waving gently as if sampling the water for chemical signals. Then, another detached, and another. Within seconds, dozens of the creatures were lifting off from the mating ball, creating a cloud of drifting, skeletal forms that surrounded the diver on all sides. They did not swim in the conventional sense. They simply allowed the slight currents to carry them, making minor adjustments with their legs to guide their trajectory. The effect was profoundly unsettling, like being in a snowstorm where every snowflake was a hand-sized spider with glowing internal organs. The diver began to ascend, trying to rise above the swarm, but the spiders were already at every depth. One landed on the diver's shoulder, its legs, each as thick as a pencil, wrapping gently around the neoprene-covered arm. There was no pain, no penetration of the suit, but the sensation of those jointed limbs gripping and holding was viscerally wrong. The diver brushed it off, but 2 more had already attached to the air tanks on the back, beyond reach. More came. They didn't attack with bites or stings. They simply held on, their clawed feet finding purchase on every available surface. The regularity of breathing became difficult to maintain as panic began to override training. The diver's light swung wildly, illuminating a nightmare carousel of skeletal bodies, grasping limbs and pulsing organs visible through translucent exoskeletons. One spider drifted directly in front of the diver's mask, its proboscis extending like a questing tongue. Through the glass, the diver could see the creature's underside in horrifying detail. The minimal body, barely larger than a walnut, with legs radiating outward like spokes. Inside those legs, dark masses shifted with each movement, the heart pumping frigid blood, the digestive tract processing nutrients, the reproductive organs swollen with genetic material meant for the mating ball below. The creature pressed its proboscis against the mask, probing, searching for soft tissue that wasn't there. The divers shook their head violently, dislodging the spider, but the action caused the breathing regulator to shift, and for one heart-stopping moment, cold water leaked into the mouth before the seal was restored. There were now more than a dozen spiders on the diver's body. The weight of them was noticeable, each one perhaps half a kilogram, collectively adding significant drag. Ascending was becoming more difficult. Every movement seemed to attract more attention from the swarm. The diver's hands worked frantically, pulling spiders off the suit and pushing them away. But there was always another drifting in to take its place. The mating ball below had almost completely disintegrated now, releasing hundreds, or perhaps thousands of spiders into the water column. The seafloor was still moving, still crawling with stragglers, but the majority had taken to the water, creating a three-dimensional cloud of living skeletons that extended in all directions. The diver made a decision: stop fighting and swim. Directional orientation was re-established. Up was where the ice ceiling waited, where the dive hole had been cut, where safety and warmth and breathable air existed. The ascent began in earnest, legs kicking in powerful strokes, arms sweeping spiders aside rather than trying to remove them completely. The swarm did not chase in the predatory sense. They simply continued their slow, inevitable drift, but the diver was now moving faster, pulling away from the main concentration. The spiders still clinging to the suit began to lose their grip in the turbulence of rapid ascent, their legs unable to maintain purchase against the force of water rushing past. One by one, they detached and fell away, tumbling slowly back down toward the darkness and the remains of their disturbed nest. The diver didn't look back, didn't slow down, didn't stop kicking until the faint glow of light through ice became visible overhead, and the rope leading to the dive hole appeared like a lifeline from heaven. Safe on the surface, stripped of dive gear and wrapped in thermal blankets, the diver tried to explain what had happened below. The words came out disjointed, inadequate. "They were everywhere," became the repeated phrase. They were inside their own legs. They moved like ghosts. The scientific team reviewed the helmet camera footage, and what they saw confirmed the impossible. The mating aggregation was a known phenomenon in sea spider biology, but never before had it been documented on this scale, and never with Colossendeis Megalonyx, one of the largest species in the world. The attack was almost certainly not predatory. The diver was far too large to be prey, but rather a defensive or investigatory response to a massive disturbance of their breeding activity. But understanding the science did not erase the existential horror of the experience. There is something uniquely disturbing about creatures that seem to violate the basic rules of anatomy, that wear their organs on the outside, that move with the patient inevitability of the undead. Sea spiders occupy an uncanny valley in nature, alien enough to be unsettling, yet familiar enough in form to trigger deep-seated arachnophobia. The giant sea spiders of Antarctica are a reminder that Earth still harbors genuinely alien life, not from other planets, but from environments so extreme that evolution has produced solutions unimaginable to surface-dwelling humans. These are not relics or curiosities. They are successful, thriving animals perfectly adapted to their nightmarish home. Polar gigantism affects many species: isopods the size of footballs, amphipods as large as rats, ribbon worms extending for meters. The mechanism is still debated, but the leading theory involves the high oxygen content of cold water combined with slow metabolism and reduced predation pressure. In this realm, growing large is not a disadvantage. It's a survival strategy. And these creatures are not passive fixtures of the deep. They are active, hungry, reproducing populations with complex behaviors we are only beginning to understand. The mating aggregations, the chemical communication, the slow-motion predation. All of it represents sophisticated biology operating on timescales and in conditions that seem impossible. For those who explore the deep, scientists, technical divers, submersible pilots, the encounter serves as a visceral reminder. The ocean is not our domain. We are visitors, fragile and temporary, in a world that operates by rules we barely comprehend. Touching the unknown is always a risk, and sometimes the unknown touches back. The diver returned to Antarctic waters the following season, but never again approached a formation without first observing from a distance, without first confirming that what appeared to be geology was not, in fact, biology. The lesson was learned in the most unforgettable way possible. In the deep cold beneath the ice, the floor can be alive, and the aliens are already here. They have been here for millions of years, long before humans walked the earth, and they will be here long after we are gone, patient, skeletal, waiting in the dark.